Fisher and Michelle Spears, Treasury Management Sales Consultants here at Wells Fargo, to guide us through today's webinar. Please feel free to type any questions that you may have in the chat or question boxes to the right, and we will address them at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. With that being said, I'd like to introduce Heather Fisher to begin our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So thank you for taking time out of your day-to-day to spend some time with Michelle and I. How do I create efficiency? How do I create automation? These are questions practices such as yours are asking today. These are questions we're going to help answer today. So our agenda for this presentation: what are the primary uses for check? What are the payment fraud trends? What are the options? Does the amount of payment matter? What are the trends? And how do you decide? When checks were first used, I wanted to include the slide to show just how far the history of checks, how far it goes back. It's pretty interesting. And of course, it's been a long time since we started using checks, but business solutions are changing. So what do you use checks for? We use them for payroll, accounts payable, business consumer payments, and then checks for all of their disbursements, so business-to-business check payments as well. What are the fraud trends in payments? More than 6 out of 10 organizations experienced attempted or actual fraud in 2012. The average financial loss was $20,300. As you can see, check fraud is much higher than other forms of payment. Fraud is not only external, but internal as well. So U.S. organizations lose about 70% of revenue to fraud. There are services banks offer to help prevent check fraud. So what are your options? Wire, which is immediate and a final payment. It can be sent to a business or a consumer. ACH, which is next day. It could be sent to a business or consumer. Commercial card payment, which is same day, typically for business to business. And of course the check payments, which is the speed is several days, and it can be sent to a consumer or business. So what is the benefit to electronic payments? 52% cost savings to a business that use electronic payments. So they've moved from check processing to initiating ACH or initiating wire or initiating a commercial card payment. There's a 40% in improved cash forecasting. And there's a 37% in fraud control, so increased fraud control in your business. What are the electronic payment options? So electronic payment options are wire, ACH, and commercial card. Wires can be templated or freeform. ACH can be used for sending money to a business or a consumer. And commercial card options are a traditional card, a declining balance card, or a virtual card. And we'll get into commercial card in a little bit. What are the trends for accounts payable? Companies are moving their check payments to ACH or a card, helping to manage working capital. For business-to-consumer payments, companies are using ACH or a prepaid card where possible. Some companies are using prepaid cards to take place of direct deposit or check payments for payroll. So now Michelle will continue with the next few slides.
So regarding what the trends are, let's talk a little bit about the trends as it relates to payment type. So first we've got ACH credit. So as you notice here on the slide, it says that payment volume for ACH credit grew 3.6% year over year. And mainly that was fueled by an increase in both consumer and B2B use. So again, another statistic to show you that electronic payments are on the rise and have continually been on the rise. And then commercial card, which is also something very near and dear to my heart, that's expected to grow 10% each year through 2016. And the estimated spend here would increase from $212 billion in 2012 to $290 billion next year. I mean, those statistics are phenomenal. That's going to be the largest growth of commercial card in a single year that we've seen since commercial card has been introduced in the AP space. So it's definitely something you want to think about when adding an additional payment type to your AP mix. Heather, if you can go to the next slide. So what do these statistics mean? 19 billion, greater than a third, and 10%. Well, 19 billion represents the decline in the number of check payments from 2003 to 2012. In 2003, that's about the time when a lot of organizations started asking the question of, why would I want to make electronic payments? And from that point forth, the whole buzz around switching from paper to electronic began. So greater than a third. So more than a third of large and middle market organizations are accepting card payments for invoices that are more than $10,000. And the reason why that's significant is because, taking a credit card for payment in a business setting, that can be pretty easy as long as an organization can take credit card in the accounts receivable space. But when you start taking payments that are in this dollar range, you're talking about making card really a payment type that anyone can use, any organization can make, right? Those larger payments are going to mean preferred suppliers can be paid via credit card, right? So that's a big deal to see that over a third are doing that.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
And then 10%. So that's the yearly decline of checks used for B2B payments. So again, we saw the 19 billion in the number of check payments that declined. But here we see a specific decline in the number of checks that were being used for business-to-business payments specifically. So it's not just something that your bank or your financial institution is talking to you about and they're trying to get you to switch over from paper to electronic. It's something that's actually happening, and there's some reasons why. So Heather, if you could go to the next slide.
Sure. I just see a question. I think someone's having trouble hearing.
Uh-oh.
I just wanted to check. I see an audience. We can't hear the speaker. Please help.
I think I just addressed it with everyone, so I think everyone can hear now.
Okay, great. Thanks. Just wanted to check.
Thanks. And I'm sorry if you didn't hear those first couple of slides that I started on. We'll make sure that folks get a copy of this presentation afterwards as well. All right, so this slide here is going to help demonstrate a benefit or even a reason really why a lot of organizations are looking at switching not just from paper to electronic, which is something definitely you want to think about, but specifically switching from check to commercial card. So as you can see here, if you were to pay a PO with a paper check, that on average would cost you about $7. Now these are very, very, broad estimates. It's going to, be something different for each and every organization. But generally speaking, it's about $7 or so to make a payment on a PO via a paper check. Now, if you look at what that would be to make that same payment using a commercial card, you'll see there that it's $3.91. That's an average savings of $3.09. So if you were to just look at your entire supplier base or all of your AP payments that you would make in a month or even a year, if you were to transition just 10% of that, imagine what that impact would do to your bottom line. A massive benefit and reason why we're seeing lots of organizations switch over from check to card. So Heather, if you can go to the next slide, we'll talk about some other benefits. Now this benefit, which is improving your working capital, this is probably, I'd say, the #1 reason why most organizations would look to switching from paper-based payments or check-based payments to card. Okay, just so you know, before I set up kind of what this slide is talking about, commercial card is the only payment type that is a win-win for both the buyer and the supplier. And this slide is going to show you why. So look at the top half. We've got the purple and the blue bar, the top two purple and blue bars. So this is saying if a buyer were to receive an invoice on day 1 and make a payment on that invoice via check on day 30, that's pretty much the time frame that they're looking at, right, for that payment to clear. They make that payment on day 30, and nowadays you don't pick up very much float at all with your check payments. You maybe maybe get a couple of days, right? Okay, so that's from the buyer's standpoint. That cash left their account when they remitted that payment or soon after they remitted that payment on day 30. For the supplier, they initiated or sent that invoice to the buyer on day 1 and didn't receive payment until day 30. So that supplier's day sales outstanding for that particular payment is about 30 days, give or take, right? So now let's look at the other scenario below that, the next two purple and blue bars. And this is assuming this scenario with a slightly different change using a commercial card for payment. Now the buyer is using a commercial card and has a little bit of leverage. They've been able to negotiate with this particular supplier. And now they've said, okay, I'm going to pay you with a card. And hey, what? If you take my card, I'll even pay you sooner. I'll pay you on day 10 instead of day 30. Now, granted, it will be net instead of, they've accepted obviously no discount on that particular invoice, or maybe the supplier wasn't offering a discount. But in any event, the supplier says, hey, that sounds good to me. I'll get my net invoice on day 10. Sure, I'll take it, and I'll take your credit card. So for the buyer, what they've done is they've made their supplier happy for one. They've paid on day 10. But they've actually increased their days payable outstanding from the check scenario. Because even though they paid on day 10, they paid with their commercial card. Now, your financial institution isn't going to bill you and then likely auto debit you or require payment until after your bill cuts off. And typically, after your bill cuts off, you've got about 10 days to make that payment to your financial institution or your card provider. So really what a buyer is doing when paying with a commercial card is they are extending their days payable by at least 10 days. And it could be more. Many times we see lots of organizations extend their days payable outstanding much more than just 10 days. But on average, that's what that buyer would be looking at. From the supplier standpoint, and this is why commercial card is a win-win. From the supplier standpoint, like I mentioned, they're happy they got funds on day 10, right? And so because of that, that supplier has been able to reduce their days sales outstanding by about 20 days. Again, the only win-win payment solution available is commercial card. So Heather, if we can go to the next slide. So one of the #1 questions we get from our from clients and from organizations that we talk to is, why would my supplier want to take a credit card? Okay, you've likely maybe even asked that question yourself to your financial institution. But keep this in mind, studies have been conducted on this topic, and the most common answer is faster payment. And this provided a unique opportunity, like I mentioned earlier, for both the buyer and the supplier to gain from electronifying the payment process using a commercial card. So the supplier is happy because they have reduced their outstanding payments, while the buyer gets to potentially increase the float period and even earn a cashback incentive if that's being offered by their card provider. Both of those things positively impact working capital, like we looked at in that previous slide. Now, another thing to note that's interesting is in more recent surveys, customer demand has actually risen to the top as the #1 consideration for organizations to accept credit card for payment. And that's an interesting shift, because now it means that you, as the payer, have the upper hand in some cases. So like I talked about in that scenario with that particular buyer being able to now negotiate, they've got some leverage. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Now, the payer or the buyer has an upper hand or some leverage they can use because they have commercial card as a payment tool. Okay. And Heather, if we could go to the next slide. So kind of where would you start then with an e-payments strategy? And you'll have to click along here with me, Heather. This one's got some transition. Okay, so what you'd likely want to do if you have not done this already with your financial institution or even your card provider, if you've got one, is to collect some data. And typically what you want to do is pull in about a year's worth of your payments. You can download that from your accounting software. Typically you're going to want to have your vendor's name, their address, the total amount you paid that vendor in a 12-month time frame. So again, pulling that for last year is usually a good bet. Then you could send that over to your financial institution so that they can analyze that data. And by analyzing the data, they're going to find out which of your vendors has the ability to take credit card. They may even be able to tell you which of your vendors are already processing credit cards for their other clients today. Then in turn, you'd be able to together create a strategy for rolling out an AP card program. Your financial institution could be able to assist you with identifying which vendors would be most likely for you to reach out to and pay first, which ones you might want to target as kind of a phase 2. So that way at the end of the day, you'll be able to achieve your bottom line goal of, and if you can click for me, Heather, of the benefits we talked about. Not only improving your working capital, reducing your check payments, thus reducing your check processing costs like we talked about in that PO scenario, but also, and I mentioned it very briefly, you may even be able to earn a cashback incentive based on the amount that you're spending. So all of that helps you to be able to put all of those benefits and reasons why you'd want to do this into perspective, because at the end of the day, if you've got a good strategy on attacking or targeting vendors that are going to take credit card or commercial card, you'll be able to reach those goals a lot sooner. And you can go ahead and move on to the next slide, Heather. So last slide for me, and before I turn it back over to Heather, is we talked about making payment, why you should do it, and the leverage that you'll be able to have, and how it's a win-win situation. So if we look at this a little deeper then, and you actually look at your payments, does size matter? Well, it depends, and that's what the slide is going to help us to determine. So for AP, companies that have a larger supplier base are typically going to see more benefits when they use ACH and commercial card together. Okay, so if you've got a large supplier base of very, very large payments down to mid-sized payments, down to even smaller payments, having a mixture of both ACH and card along with some type of onboarding process provided through your financial institution is going to give you the most successful electronic payment variety, okay? So when you look at that, we're going to talk about the type of disbursement and why that's important. So who is your company paying? And the reason why that's important is because you may be able to, for instance, pay certain suppliers with ACH only because that's all they mandate. A case in point there would be maybe certain types of legal entities may not take commercial card, but they will definitely take ACH. So looking at who you're paying is definitely going to be something that you want to make sure you pay attention to. Now, are the disbursements recurring or one time? Now, it's kind of debatable here. Recurring is going to be extremely easy for commercial card, right? All you've got to do is give that card number to that particular supplier that you have a recurring payment with, and they can easily charge that card on a regular basis. Now, you can do that with ACH too. One-time payments, again, I'd say obviously very easy for commercial card, especially if you don't have an established relationship with that vendor. Paying them with a commercial card means they get guaranteed payment, and so very likely they're going to be pretty open to that. How fast do you need the funds to get to the payee? Now that's an obvious one. If it needs to be right away, commercial card is going to be your best bet. If they can wait a couple of days, sometimes ACH you can do same day, but typically you're going to be doing 2-day ACH. So if it needs to be right away, commercial card might be your best bet. What are the disbursement amounts? Again, remember size does matter because very, very large payments, vendors might shy a little bit away from taking card, even though we do see an increase on those payments that are over $10,000 going on the uptick. And what are the disbursements for? So there are certain things that commercial card may not be the best bet for, and same thing with ACH. So you want to make sure that you're taking all these things into consideration. And again, your financial institution or your card provider would be the best ones to help you come up with a plan so that all of these things are taken into consideration when you're determining whether it should be ACH or it should be card. Okay, so I'll flip over to the next slide and I'll turn it back over to Heather.
So checks aren't going away. 57% of payments made by check in the typical organization today. 74% was the number in 2007. So of course if you move some payments to ACH and card, you may have a handful of checks or checks that still need to be printed out or written out. So what do you do in that case? What are other ways to optimize your payments? You can save time printing those checks, stuffing the envelopes, stamping them, and signing the checks by sending a payment file to your bank. This file can include checks, as well as ACH and wire and pretty much all of your payments. So what would happen is you would send a file out of your accounting system and send it to your bank instead of having to print the checks. So it eliminates the time and cost for eliminating the time and cost for supplies, the paper, the ink, the envelopes. And instead of signing all the checks, what happens is a file would be sent back to the approver. So when the bank receives the information and the check payments, a file would be sent back to the approver to create a secondary approval. Once the bank receives that approval, then we can make those, process those payments for you, eliminating that workflow and allowing individuals in the office be able to do something that's revenue generating versus printing and stuffing the envelopes. So how do you decide? So here is a small case study, accounts payable for business-to-business disbursements. For accounts payable, business-to-business disbursements, you'd want to use ACH. For core supplier payments, includes most remittance detail with the payment. You'd want to use a wire for large transactions that are immediate, so something that has to be sent same day and has to be paid that same day, or a final payment. A wire typically also would be used for international vendor payments as well. And when do you want to use a commercial card? You want to use a commercial card for invoice payments to suppliers and also travel and expenses. So you could put travel and expenses on the same card as well as when you pay your suppliers or for purchasing. So here's just a couple quotes. Embrace the past, learn from it, and improve upon it. So there's a lot of things that you might be comfortable with in your business, the workflow, your payables, and your receivables. But it's always good to look into how you can streamline, how you can create efficiency, how you can automate, especially when it comes to payables, and move those payments to electronic payments. So now I'm going to open up for questions, if anybody has any questions. I hope you learned something today from the presentation and gave you some food for thought on some ideas to talk to your bank about. Now, if you have a question, you can actually type it in the right side of the screen. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions.
You actually do have a question.
Oh,
When using a credit card, the vendor pays a percentage. There is a cost involved. How is this different from any other credit card?
Good question. This is Michelle. I'll take that one, Heather, if that's okay. So this isn't different from any other credit card. A vendor who processes Visa or MasterCard, which that's the Visa MasterCard is what I'm talking about today. There's no different from any credit card in the market when it comes to what a vendor pays when they process a credit card payment. However, I will say that the vendor has to set up credit card processing with whomever they decide to do that with. And so when they do that, they will negotiate their pricing when they set up their program. So every vendor is going to be different. And then Visa and MasterCard run kind of a special pricing program so that when vendors process a payment over a certain dollar amount, they get to pay a smaller fee. And that special pricing program has kind of a lot to do with why we're starting to see larger payments, like I was mentioning, over $10,000 being processed now. But yeah, you're typically going to see anywhere from about 1% to 2 to 2.5% being on the high end of what a vendor will pay. Many times, though, providers will blend that in and charge that percentage on total payments. Maybe they may charge that on a per payment. It's just all going to depend on what pricing that vendor has negotiated with their own card provider. So hopefully that answers the question a little bit for you.
Do we have any other questions at this time?
Yes, hi, this is Kevin Agnes again, and I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time out during your lunch period here to listen to the presentation. Hopefully there was some valuable information that I know I gained from this that you did as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Heather, Michelle, or myself, and we'll be happy to talk to you about that. And we will be at the annual conference at the end of the month, so please stop by the Wells Fargo booth and we'll be able to answer any questions that you may have.
And
Thank you very much,
just to reiterate, everyone that's asking about the full presentation or slides, they will be sent out electronically to all attendees. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.